Hello and welcome. Well, it seems like it's deja vu. I'm here to report on yet another resounding loss, this time off the back of a blistering performance by the ladder leaders. And they're there for a reason. While it's very easy to be down in the dumps, I think there's some merit in watching the game back and understanding what the benchmark looks like, paired alongside what Carlton's standard is, to see the difference, because my god, it was stark. That'll be my goal today, to paint that picture through some second and third quarter tape. Let's dive in. Now, the interesting picture painted from the second quarter depicts a fair disparity in the inside 50s. The clearances are even, the contested ball is even, however the tackling and marking is heavily favouring the Pies. This would indicate Carlton's struggle to control and advance, despite generally holding up at the contest. Collingwood's ability to control had them involved in some dominant chains that helped them gain territory, and their pressure placed them in good stead to hold position, playing into Carlton's struggle. We start here. There's space upfield which Carlton will try to access. Here's Moyer and here's Cripps. Cameron will go to impact, Pitnet won't. De Koning will need to compensate, which will leave Howe alone as he remains down and behind the ball. Moyer's never really picked up. He bursts through unaccompanied as Cripps is clean with the hands. The difference with Collingwood and Carlton here, the tackling. How many broken tackles did Collingwood benefit from on the night? Carlton, well, they don't see the same benefit here, as all they need to do is breach the last line. At the next contest, you see a different element of composure for the Pies, through Pendlebury, who swivels after ignoring the crisp decoy to find Houston, who not only has time to assess, but execute. Collingwood smartly attack a weaker matchup for Carlton on the night, and while Carlton repossess, that's short-lived. They play way too straight. The kick is given air, because Pendlebury, an earlier impactor, closes Motlop down. As an armchair expert, it's very easy to say, but a slight pivot in ball movement with pace to still reach the same goal, that would work wonders. The pattern's reminiscent of a later quarter example where a similar path would have a very similar outcome in a very similar part of the ground. Collingwood start again with control, hitting targets, and pressuring when they don't. Carlton repossess again, but the forward 50 transition occurs along the line. Darcy Cameron, who impacted before, impacts again in getting back and affecting the kick. Given how open the 50 is, not getting a shot is damaging. The small forwards, presumably still in the back half, can't pressure this. There's no one to really. When it spills, Collingwood, as winners of the one-on-one, have the time to assume control. On the switch, Collingwood's first kick draws their man to the ball, eliminating the impact of Carlton's half-assed front shoulder defensive coverage. Then there's a contested mark, and then with Pitnet by himself given Cameron stationing, it's criminal he concedes a free kick. The artwork is in the synchronicity between Myercheck's spin and collect and Dacos's run, occurring only just after Hewitt head checks to see Dacos next to him, and he scores a goal. In this build-up, we saw crucial aerial wins and superiority at ground level. But prior to that, we saw limited blue possession chains, Collingwood defensive pressure, and a solid marking game, and a lack of tackling by the Blues, all consistent with our statistical observations. I've got another great example here. Crisp starts off with it, and Dan Houston's kick drops the ball into the space behind Hoskin Elliott, where there's no Carlton defensive coverage and he can use the body effectively. The mark unlocks opportunities, control up the ground, and some dash, which is more at a premium when contested footy is prevalent. Akers does well to avert a catastrophe, but Carlton plays straight line football again. I remember vividly options available out wide, but Crisp forces the turnover with his third involvement in this sequence. Dacos on the turnover pivots, something Carlton don't do, Exhibit A, about 10 seconds ago. It would have been very easy to get attracted by this proposition, and to be fair, Dacos could probably execute it, but with some more calculation on this kick, this would have been a great play. Carlton, in winning the ball back, get a great low and flat kick out of Moyer, denying the usual pass to, say, Hollands, and the nature of that kick plus a strong grab changes the game. Look at all the accessible options queuing up in the middle. You've got space, You can even do a loopy kick or a handball for it. We ignore it, but there is a second window on the next kick. A pivot, that word again, would see a clearer path to goal. But Hollands makes the same movement he did up the ground. The kick is loopy, the man is stationary. And in not utilizing the advantage here, these midfielders all on the outside will get used for uncontested possessions the other way. And then you see experience combined very much on the same page. Pendlebury wants Elliott to come to the footy. Myercheck vacates, Lipinski hook turns out of the way. And as a result, the target is hit with precision. Collingwood pressure, decision-making, control, and smarts, all constants again. Carlton had some good moments, the infrastructure to perform, but lacked the same attributes as the Pies and came away with nothing. Even on this example, it's a rare poor bit of execution by the Pies that allows Carlton to kickstart their chain to get into the 50, which they haven't really given much exposure to. Nothing's ahead in terms of tall timber, and this lead by Evans gets ignored, which is why this kick is such a win as it defies the laws of physics. But why on earth are we ignoring Pitto as an option? Even De Koning lesser so. Some fans call Pitto a liability. Well, he's been treated like it on this occasion. He marks, surely you get an option running past, maybe a little block by Pitto. Off you go, happy days. Instead, we don't see this maximised. You see some indecision, complete opposite to what we saw with the Pies on the previous example. Motlop wants it out here, which is outlandish, given how long it'll sit up and how small he is. If anything, this is the only spot which Collingwood ideally want to force Carlton into kicking towards. Fogarty has a slim chance of getting it, but the kick confirms a poor outcome. The kick has Williams and Fogarty under the ball, and you'll notice Motlop has a weird stutter in his run, and he falls behind Quaynor. The problem with the tall timber not being used here, well, you're not kicking to them here either. At least if you use them here, you may actually be playing into the small forward impact on the far side with a lower flighted pass. It's not smart footy, and it's a pretty bad use of your resources. And then Collingwood proceed to pass their way out without Carlton laying a hand on them. And Carlton don't see it in their forward half for the rest of the quarter, where after being let off the hook once, we see the symptoms of the quarter appear again. A failure to tackle for the Blues, and quick and smart disposal, and dominance in the air for the Pies. With Collingwood, it's about moments. 6 scores from 20 inside 50s doesn't indicate blistering. They had Carlton's scoring negated, but when you look at the build-up to these goals, it's about being that extra 1% better. They overcame Carlton's solid defensive stand with fleeting moments of brilliance, and doing the basics right to still be 3 goals better in the quarter. That's classy, and that's what Carlton don't possess right now. The third quarter has some subtle changes. The tackling improves, however with good reason. Carlton were chasing a lot. Down 32 on disposals, marks also diminished, with only 10 outside the 50 or uncontested. Though interestingly, the clearances were heavily lopsided in Carlton's favour. This would point towards a lack of efficiency, with possession chains barely lasting, or reaping far lesser output than the Pies. Overcoming the inside 50 disparity from the second was key to having a chance. But with Collingwood's ascendancy occurring universally on the field, in the air, and on the ground, with their disposal, this equated to a lethal style of play, especially in the back half of the third, after a largely even earlier portion. On the night, Carlton were -27 in the post-clearance contested ball, meaning the clearance numbers check out, as they were +9 in clearance contested ball. But all that advantage they may have gained with clearance completely dissipated if they couldn't score, if they couldn't tackle to keep it thereabouts, if they couldn't negate their marking, if they couldn't cut off Collingwood's circulation with their ground level possessions. And it showed, as that's how it always ended up at the other end, and they scored with practically every second half entry. Here's one example of that. Carlton's clearance results in a behind. You'll see some body work by Sullivan and Myercheck give Darcy Cameron a free run at the ball. There's the contested mark. Then internally, Hollands and Doherty are on Mitchell and Lipinski. Upfield, we give away a free kick. Doherty's gone behind the contest for the dump-off, Hollands defaults to do the same as he rotates around. This free merged with the spoil provides this positional advantage, and these three forwards pushing up all have 0 impact. Lipinski overcomes 1, Quaynor 2, and that's how Perryman and Houston are open on the fat side. And McGovern just vacates Elliott. That's how you get so much control. As opposed to Carlton, whose possession chains were not prolonged nor productive. Anything but controlling. On this example, here's some contrast for you. Carlton have a number up at the stoppage, Collingwood win the clearance, and Lipinski up at the ball works his backside off to negate the numerical advantage. As the ball is spread wide, the on-ball pressure brings in more Collingwood defensive presence. Then at the next stoppage, the same applies, but Carlton win the ball. A quick kick ends the possession chain at 1. Collingwood swing it the other way. Carlton don't even secure the ball, and as a result, Collingwood get an entry. In taking this mark, they secure the positioning. You've just seen one team fight and succeed for positioning with one clearance win. Carlton have had the same amount of clearance wins, they've just been sent back. And following a miss that arises from this mark, Collingwood can flex their muscles on all fronts from the kick-in that follows. De Koning's positioning is puzzling, Curnow is wider, and Cripps, apparently the option we're going for, he gets overshot. Even still, we will have a spare man at the fall of the ball. However, it's the unlikely sweeper McStay who pressures, leaves this possession chain at 1, and cripples these Blues for impact. So you've won the ground ball, and then this kick is perfectly weighted for Lipinski to meet it with a momentous leap. And he looks right, but the diversion to go left is excellent. McGovern and Wiedering are guarding a largely spacious back 50 and are prepared for it to go on the diagonal. This angular change is consistent with angular changes we've discussed. Wiedering's deserted Elliott, McGovern has no business getting involved, O'Farrell's getting shepherded out of the way, and Frankie Evans can't defend. In one play, you've seen a team show their worth aerially, at ground level, with their disposal. And they do it from their back half incrementally. On the flip side, you've seen a Carlton team hold a grand total of 2 disposals. And the very next play, it takes a total of 3 disposals in about 10 seconds for the devastation to continue. Look at the setup for Carlton. 2 defensive side runners, this Carlton man wants to burst through. With their positioning, Hewitt will need to overcome 3 pies plus his direct assignment to feed it out. The ball spills loose, and here's the 3 disposals. The most subtle of toe pokes to Tom Mitchell by Scott Pendlebury, a handball to Lipinski the half forward, who's afforded very little space, and then a centimetre perfect delivery to Elliott. Again, showing their worth at ground level with their disposal. And this continued again, and again, and again. Need I say more? The last goal of the quarter sums it right up. You can preempt exactly how the path of the ball is going to go for the Pies if everything goes their way. The tap, the handball, the run, the slip. The attention Dacos brings gives Pendlebury space. Hollands has rolled up, and Pendlebury is unfazed. Gestures for a handball, but then adapts. Underneath 2 smother attempts, he finds the advantage out wide. Hollands' man, presumably Sullivan, the half forward, is open out wide. Doherty has now taken the Elliott assignment. Akers has to cover 2. He wants coverage behind him for Crisp, but Doc isn't even looking. And you can't leave Elliott open, especially considering their third quarter execution inside forward 50. Hollands isn't doing anything in this space, and in the end, because of the ripple effect with what occurred in the middle, Crisp is open. Yet again, showing their worth at ground level with their disposal. Simply the best. So there you have it. The class difference was immense. Collingwood were clinical in everything they did, and Carlton's most valiant attempts to match still were met with disadvantage. I don't necessarily think Carlton lacked effort. I think Collingwood's class and the same old deficiencies that come with decision making and disposal really failed the Blues again. What are your thoughts on the outcome of this one? Do you agree with me or think there was another explanation? Thanks for 3K subs. Really appreciate the support. I'll be back to do it all again next week, but until then, stay safe, chat soon, and bye for now.